Hello, my name is Dan Farisi. I am Group Director of Content and Editorial, Industrial and Tech here at Emerald, working with the Commercial Integrator and Security Sales and Integration brands. We're so excited to have all of you here today for our annual State of the Integration Industry webinar, which is done in partnership with NSCA. Thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be an absolutely packed 1 hour conversation touching on all the latest trends in, developments in, and just kind of what we're seeing in the AV industry and the security industry, broadly the entire integration industry, so that you all can be positioned to optimize your business for success, anticipate any landmines or any issues that may be coming, and really fortify yourself for those issues. I do want to thank ADI and Salient Systems for sponsoring this content. This content could not be brought to you without the invaluable support of ADI and Salient Systems. I do have a quick message from ADI. This webinar is sponsored by ADI Global Distribution. ADI is a leading distributor and solution provider of security, AV, and low voltage products, serving more than 110,000 customers worldwide. ADI gives customers more products, more services, more shopping convenience, more local expertise, and more innovation, empowering professionals to design and deliver complete solutions. To learn more, visit adiglobal.com. Again, thank you to ADI and Salient Systems for facilitating this content being brought to you today. Let's talk just a little bit about the webinar platform that you're looking at right now. The ON24 console that you're looking at can be completely customized to meet your needs. You can move and resize windows. You can make the video or slides larger or smaller as you see fit. And you'll also find an array of interactive tools as part of the experience. For example, you'll see a media player button for your video and volume, a Q&A box, and you can submit your questions using this widget at any time during the presentation today. We'll get to as many of those questions as we can at the end of the presentation. There's also a resource list and downloads box where you can click through and download the slides and any related resources from our sponsor organizations, NSCA, ADI, and Salient Systems. Perhaps most important is the survey icon. You can click to share your feedback at any point during today's session. Your input is extremely important to us. So before logging off today, please do take a moment to share your feedback and help us make future events even more impactful, even more beneficial, even more worthy of your time. Of course, as I mentioned, you can expand the media player if you'd like to see the speakers or the chart data more clearly. If you have any follow-up questions or if you need help with your experience, just press the help icon and you'll be able to get further guidance in real time from our team. Without any further ado, I did want to recognize and thank our speakers here today. Of course, we have David Fisher, President, Systems Integration Division, IMS Technology Services. I would be remiss not to note that IMS Technology Services was recently crowned our Integrator of the Year for 2025, so congratulations for that. And he is joined, of course, by Tom LeBlanc, Executive Director of NSCA. Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much, Tom, for joining us today for what should be a really fascinating conversation about the state of the integration industry.
Well, thanks for having us, Dan.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks, Dan.
So let's get right into it. And I'm going to start with a little bit of data from our most recent State of the Industry survey that was conducted in partnership with NSCA. And hopefully this is visible to all of you who are watching the webinar right now. This is about current business climate, and this is what the data shows from our industry-wide survey. But why don't you, David and Tom, give us a snapshot from your point of view about how you would characterize the overall climate for integration businesses now as 2026 begins? What key factors would you say are going to shape industry performance, and are they auguring well or maybe auguring poorly for what we can expect as integrators this coming year?
I'll speak just from our perspective. We're fairly bullish on 2026, as are the integrators that I have spoken with. I think that fairly summarizes the outlook more broadly. I've probably spoken with 24 integrators just in the last 6 months. I think the prevailing trends are backlogs that are strong, pipelines that are robust, and optimism that is fairly strong as well. I would say cautious optimism, probably. is how I might summarize it. Some of the things that I think are on everybody's mind are pretty obvious. There's always the macroeconomic uncertainties, inflationary headwinds, tariffs, recession, margin compression. Additionally, if you follow some of the CIO, CTO survey data, there's some stuff out there from Morgan Stanley and Gartner that would indicate that maybe IT spending is not going to be as robust as it was. Still strong, but not as robust. A little bit tighter. I think governance around certain spending is probably the best way to summarize that. But I still think there's lots of room for optimism. I know from an IMS perspective, our backlog, for example, is twice what it was heading into 2025. So we are bullish on the new year, and I think there's some pent-up demand from 2025 as well that we'll see materialize into more business in 26. Tom?
Thank you for sharing that bullishness. How about you, Tom? Do you share that same bullishness? Do you have any notes of caution you would add? How would you describe it?
Yeah, I really like the way, Dave answered that question. And I agree, and cautious optimism is a great way to put it. It also, the way, Dave kind of got into the nitty gritty of it, it allows me to talk a little bit more conceptually about, what's shaping the industry. And, I think when we think about the overall climate, for integrators heading into 2026, the first thing that feels really important to acknowledge is how important integrators are to their customers across pretty much every vertical market. Integrators are so relevant right now. And that word relevant really seems to come up an awful lot. When you think about it, our industry, this integration industry, has always been about relevance. The challenge of being relevant and increasingly the challenge of remaining relevant. And integration companies, they offer something to their customers that their customers can't provide on their own in most cases. Security, life safety, communications, AV. Increasingly, it's complete full business solutions and not just systems. And what makes integrators so relevant is their ability to stay a step ahead, to kind of anticipate what their customers need before customers even really are able to fully articulate it. So the catch is that, remaining relevant is getting harder. So you think about factors that shape the industry in 2026. Let's talk about AI for just a quick second. Integrators may not think they're in the AI business, but their customers probably expect them to be. Integrators might not think they're in the cybersecurity business, but their customers absolutely expect them to be. But the good news is, all this pressure on integrators, it exists because of how important integrators are, right? And then Dave talked a little bit about, economic concerns, and I couldn't agree more with that term, cautiously optimistic. But that's not a bad thing. The cautious part isn't a bad thing. That's consistent with, what we see, and we'll see some more data from the State of the Industry survey, but it's consistent with what we're seeing. But in this question that you have up there, Dan, people are asked to describe overall business climate. The strongest response was, I think, it's good with room for improvement, right? There's real concern out there about things, things like tariffs, broader uncertainty. Reading the newspaper these days can definitely create a lot of anxiety. And that's driving more thoughtful, disciplined, go, no-go decisions among integrators. So from NSCA's perspective, we believe our members are really, relatively well-positioned to weather uncertainty because they lean on strength. They lean on strong partners. They have great peers in the NSCA community. They lean on strong data. And that also shows up in NSCA's financial analysis of the industry where, respondents similarly express confidence in their, financial position over the next couple of years. By the way, I mentioned that report, Dan. If you don't mind, I may occasionally cross-reference the data that we're going to talk about with some data from that NSCA report. Sometimes it's helpful because it'll validate trends with the different data sets. But the bottom line, I love that term, cautiously optimistic. That feels great. Great way to describe the overall climate.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, feel free to introduce any data that you think would enrich the presentation. No problem whatsoever. What I would say is, in general, it seems to me like an excellent time to be an integrator, but it's an especially excellent time to be a thoughtful, disciplined, strategic integrator that really thinks carefully about the projects you take on and making sure you're not just working hard, but working profitably and working smart. So, and that's obviously something that NSCA and its resources are invariably helpful in making happen. So, thank you for that. Let's move on to the next question, talking a little bit about backlog. And I know you said, David, that your backlog is looking really, really strong right now. We had a little bit of mixed data from our survey report, but I'm curious, Tom, you speak to a lot of integrators every day. Have you noticed any shifts in the types of projects being prioritized, their budgets, what backlogs are looking like among NSCA members and others in the industry you talk to?
Yeah, so like you said, in the state of the industry survey here, it looks pretty flat when you compare, what the backlog looks like going into 2026 versus 2025. And yeah, we talk to integrators about this all the time, and we also kind of focused in on it in the financial analysis of the industry. In that report, by the way, there was overall there was a slight dip in median backlog, but it's still well above levels from a few years ago. So the more interesting thing, though, when we kind of looked at the data and the financial analysis of the industry, was looking at how backlog differs based on company size. So like mid-sized firms, which we categorized as 10 to 20 million, reported 4 million in backlog, and that covers roughly 91% of their typical gross profit. And then smaller firms, which we categorized as under 5 million, reported much thinner backlogs. And that was about 150,000, which covered just 10% of overhead. Those are a couple of examples, but in general, it kind of reinforced that larger companies were kind of better positioned, going into the year. And again, that kind of reinforces the importance of financial discipline and smart project selection and capacity planning as we head into 2026.
Is there anything you would add, David, about how you facilitated that level of backlog, doing so well heading into 2026? Anything you would add about your own specific circumstance?
Yeah, look, I think it falls into some buckets, right? So some of it was certainly some pent-up demand. There was a little bit of brake tapping with some of the uncertainty, particularly in the first half of 2025 with tariffs and supply chain issues and all of that nonsense that we have dealt with. And, we continue to hear and see tremors around those same issues. So, but I think people are more accustomed to dealing with them and moving on with business as usual in the latter part of 2025 and into 2026. I think there's maybe another piece of it that's probably customer specific. So just, how your customers themselves are reacting to, their macroeconomic realities. And then I think also end markets, there could be some challenges there with certain end markets maybe facing more severe headwinds and therefore are more on the cautious side of that equation than optimistic. So I think there'll be a lot of reasons why backlogs might ebb and flow to one direction or another.
Before I move on to the next question, I just want to remind everyone attending that we do have the Q&A box open. So as questions pop into your mind as David and Tom speak, don't hesitate to drop them into the Q&A widget in real time. That way you don't forget about it and lose the question. All of the questions that are already starting to come in are being logged, and we will get to them in the last 10 to 15 minutes of this webinar presentation. But if you would like to get David or Tom's perspective on something in particular, especially something that they've brought up so far or will in the future, be sure to drop it in the Q&A widget so we do not overlook that question. We're going to get to as many of them as we possibly can. With that being said, I'd like to move on next to talking a little bit about the environment for regional integrators who may be looking to dive into multi-location types of opportunities. Would you say partnerships are a viable means for integrators to expand their footprint? What would you say you're seeing out there on the competitive landscape right now in this regard, the idea of regional integrators trying to make a play in multi-location kind of a context?
I can jump in there, Dave. If it's
Yeah,
okay.
go ahead, Tom.
First of all, Dan, the partnership angle is definitely viable. You think about like the competitive landscape out there. If you're a regional integrator, you're looking at a lot of strong, national and global integrators that you're competing with. That definitely kind of changes the equation for the smaller companies. And, at NSCA, I would probably rather not talk about whether or not expansion of a company is viable, because it'd be more of a one-off, in-depth conversation. But I would love to talk a little bit about, why integrators feel pushed in that direction, that they need to expand. It feels like customers are becoming more technology agnostic. So in many cases, like when they think about their integration company, they're not thinking about them as an AV integrator or a security integrator or anything like that. They want technology that solves business problems. And they really don't care about the label of the company that provides those solutions. And that's where terms like master systems integrator comes into play. And these are companies that can kind of bring things together: AV, security, life safety, communications, monitoring, energy, digital signage, the whole ecosystem. And very few integrators do all of that. And that's okay. What matters is, having a strong niche, being able to bolt on adjacent technologies, being fluent in IP environments. So, a company can still do the monitoring and the managed services in a situation like that. So when you think about expansion and multi-location opportunities, for many NSCA members, it comes down to figuring out how they can bolt on those capabilities. And that often leads them to strategic partnerships as the answer. So, being smart about figuring out how to cast a wide net, even if you're a smaller company, seems to be a big driver of that. Now, growth is absolutely possible, but it has to be the right kind of growth, and it has to be executed intentionally. So I think that's a really interesting question that you brought up, Dan.
So it sounds like not necessarily you need to train the same group of people to be a jack of every trade, but rather, as you say, kind of bolt on competencies by partners and associates and affiliates, so that you don't necessarily have to have your own team retrained across 7 different disciplines. But if you have a network of partners and affiliates and associates that can work in tandem, then you can aspire to be that master systems integrator and have potentially a larger footprint, not just in terms of your discipline, but also perhaps even geographically. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, I mean, if a company has the ability to have all those offerings and all that expertise in-house, then boy, that puts them in a fantastic situation. But there aren't a lot of companies that have the nimbleness and ability to get there very quickly. So being very strategic about partnerships that allow you to be that one contact for your customer and bolt on the technologies and business solutions that they need, that's the key. And we're seeing a lot of NSA member companies prioritize that.
Dave?
Yeah, I might bolt on. I agree 100% with what Tom said there. I do think even if you're myopically staying within the framework of AV as an integrator, I think regional and national enterprise customers that you serve or have served locally, I think are increasingly looking for that enterprise-wide standard and deployment, one ubiquitous experience, if you will, across their landscape. Which means consistency not only in technology, but programming, user experience, and so on. So local integrators, if you're used to serving this caliber of client, in order to continue to serve them, those expectations are that you're able to extend your footprint and your coverage map to accommodate those needs. So, either you're going to try to travel that, which may be the right answer in certain situations, or most likely going to be some sort of hybrid approach where you're depending on partners to help enable your ability to serve that regional or national enterprise client. And so I think the right partnerships create opportunities to extend that coverage map, and finding those providers that share similar values, philosophies, and methodologies, is a great strategy to be able to enable that and actualize that strategy. I think there's a term out there called co-opetition that many of you have probably heard of, where essentially one day a fellow integrator might be perceived as a competitor in a certain situation, but on a different day in another situation, such as what I'm describing and Tom and I are talking about in terms of partnerships, they may be somebody you're cooperating with because it is not competing with, because it's in everyone's best interest. So I do think that is a part of the landscape. I know many others are doing that. We're no exception. Gosh, probably at any given time, we probably have a half a dozen projects going on around the country that partners are helping us with in one form or another.
Thank you so much for that, Dave. And I want to go back now to something that you mentioned a few moments ago, Tom, the idea of kind of being that strategic advisor, that strategic consultative partner to clients, not simply being a contractor or a supplier, but actually being kind of in their corner and guiding them through technologies that are continuing to develop. For example, AI. The whole idea of integrators positioning themselves as kind of a trusted thought leader for their clients. I'm interested in how you think we can facilitate customer strategy with new technology and kind of be in their corner, especially if they find themselves excited or confused about AI. Can we be that person they go to, that organization they go to make them feel better and understand it better?
I think so. And, I think that really should be the goal for a lot of integrators out there. The biggest growth opportunities for integrators aren't just about, the technology themselves. They're about, like you said, Dan, they're about the expertise that integrators bring alongside it. And you mentioned AI. And AI is the perfect example. Many integrators don't see themselves as AI leaders, and that's understandable because we're all kind of figuring it out, right? But customers don't make that distinction. Customers see their integrator as a trusted technology advisor, and they expect guidance on how AI impacts outcomes and efficiency and long-term value. And that's tricky because at the same time, integrators are going through their own AI journey, right? They're learning how AI affects customer-facing solutions. They're exploring how AI can impact internal efficiencies, and they're trying to balance excitement around AI with responsible decision-making around AI. And customers are doing the exact same thing. And from their perspective, it's logical to expect their integrator to help them sort through all that. What's real, what's practical, what's safe. And that's where the challenge really comes in. How many integration companies actually have enough feet on the ground that are prepared to play that advisory role today? Probably not enough. And AI isn't the only example. The same dynamic exists with things like cybersecurity. Integrators may not think of themselves as cyber leaders, but customers absolutely expect cybersecurity credibility from anybody that's putting devices on their network, right? So NSCA sees the roles of integrators changing when it comes to cybersecurity. So the opportunity and probably the responsibility for integrators is for them to kind of lean into that advisory role that you were describing, Dan. And the tricky part is they kind of have to do that even while they're still learning themselves. But that's the huge growth opportunity, is to be the advisor that helps customers through a transition that they're all going through right now. An exciting transition. There's a lot of exciting things happening in customer organizations right now. They're excited about the impact that AI can have on their companies. They're excited about evolving technology. And integrators that are well positioned to play an advisor role to help them with that excitement and turn it into execution, well, that's a great growth opportunity.
David, with IMS Technology Services being just named Integrator of the Year, I have to imagine, that recognition must mean that you've adopted that advisory stance. What is your thought on that whole idea, being not just a provider of technology, but a strategic advisor to your clients?
Yeah, so as a company that does a fair amount of design build, that is a built-in expectation of our customers. I think if you think about the landscape in terms of bid spec versus design build or sole source, in a bid spec world, there's not much of that expected because others have already framed what that application will dictate, what the technology will be, and it's basically following that plan. But it's certainly with integrators that are doing a fair amount of design build or sole source, customers expect that. It's table stakes. I spend as much time as I possibly can in the field with customers, and I will always ask, how are we doing meeting your needs, and what is it that we might be able to do better? And usually if something comes up, it's an incident specific thing, which sometimes those happen, rarely, but sometimes. Usually it's more in that area. It's like, we really need you guys to be continuing to be front and center as our strategic advisor. We don't want to have to send people to the shows and the events. We don't want to have to track all the updates. What we want is for our partner, you, IMS, to make sure that we are being kept apprised of things that are relevant to us, and things that are coming, things that we should look at now, things that, hey, this is probably coming down the pipe that you might want to plan for the future. So I think it's table stakes. It's absolutely expected. And so we really try hard to do that. When we attend the events, we send a number of folks, and each one has their own agenda of things that they are bringing back information on. We go to industry events, certainly product launches we expect a lot of our partners to keep us up to speed on that stuff, as I'm sure everybody on this call does. And then we verticalize that and try to take that information. And so say, for example, for higher ed, the things that are relevant there, present and potentially future, and then serving that up to them in business reviews and, correspondence that we send out targeted to our customer base. And, it's just my firm opinion, and I'm sure shared by many on this call, that if you're not assuming that role for your customers, somebody else probably will, and that's probably not a good thing.
Absolutely true. Thank you so much for that, Dave. I will say before we move on to the next question, just again, a reminder, questions are already starting to flow into the Q&A widget, but we want to make sure we get to as many of them as we possibly can. So please do drop those Q&A widget questions in there right now. We're going to be queuing them all up and getting through as many as we possibly can at the tail end of the webinar, but make sure your question is not left out. Drop it in the widget right now if you would, please, and as they continue to occur to you for the balance of the webinar. So as you can see from this table, we're going to start talking a little bit about services and RMR. So let's get right into it. We've been talking about the importance of that services RMR for a very long time, but I'm interested in how we connect the execution to the strategy. There's been a certain level of staticness to the numbers each year as we conduct the State of the Industry survey. We are seeing, as you can see in the table, a little bit of incremental improvement in terms of how much revenue is being services driven or subscriptionized. But I would like to know, Tom and Dave, your thoughts about connecting execution to strategy and actually making a dent in this question of how we pivot ourselves from purely being kind of CapEx and project based to an organization or an industry that's more services and recurring revenue driven.
Yeah, look, I can start, Tom, if you like. Sure. So, from my perspective, I don't think the AV industry reacted slowly on this because leaders were wrong. I think it reacted slowly and still is reacting slowly because the transition is genuinely hard, and it's countercultural. This is both an executional and an operational challenge. Unwinding the DNA that exists in our collective project-centric focus is harder, I think, than most people expect. Integrators are conditioned to be project-centric. We bid, we win, we install, we commission, and then it's wash, rinse, repeat. Our sales compensation plans are structured that way. Our tenured salespeople have been doing this for years, if not decades, that way. We've trained our customers to think that way. Our KPIs are all wrapped around that. And so it has always been project and then, and plus this if you can. And I think the behaviors are changing. I think the appetite is there, but getting it to move faster is tackling those executional and cultural challenges. And so I think AV integrators that are intent on being more services centric, they've got to reinvent their operating models, I believe, to get better outcomes. They've got to have IT capabilities. They've got to have support capabilities. They've got to think through what are they going to do to handle, if they're going to handle monitoring, and what's the go-to-market shift look like, and how do we think about lifetime value versus value of the project in our business model. And so, and then, in our go-to-market, is it too hard to change what we have done? Are we better off, say from a sales perspective, does it make more sense to have some dedicated sales folks focused on selling services? Is it that different? All these things I think need wrestled with, and then making sure in the end our value proposition is solid. Are we promoting the right things in a way that the economic buyer, the IT stakeholder, can grab hold of that value prop, which interestingly, they've embraced in a number of other low voltage offerings, such as obviously MSPs, physical security, networking, cabling, and so on. So in any event, I think there is it's just not that easy to unwind the DNA that is so built into what we do as an industry.
I think you'd agree with that, Tom, right? Unwinding the DNA or reimagining the DNA is not as easy as snapping our fingers.
Yeah, I really like the way Dave described that. And, it's frustrating. Like, when you look at the data and the needle doesn't move, you get like an emotional response because it's like, oh boy, this is so important for the industry. We've been talking about services and recurrent revenue for such a long time. And, there's a reason why we talk about it so much, because the benefits, the improved cash flow, the stronger valuations, the stickier customer relationships. But, as Dave just described and the data shows, the transition is difficult. The needle hasn't moved much. And that does not mean that integrators don't understand the strategy. It means that execution is hard, right? So what might be changing a little bit is how mission critical the systems that integrators provide have become. Security, life safety, AV, communications, all of it's got to work, right? It all has to work now. It always had to work, but it seems like now it's more mission critical. Downtime is not acceptable anymore. That maybe creates a real opening for managed services and monitoring and support models. And the companies that have tried really hard to get there, the ones that have invested in infrastructure and processes and talent, they're entering this year in a strong position to make more of an impact with regards to service and recurring revenue. And for others, the opportunity is still there, but it requires commitment, it requires patience, and requires internal change. It's not just a pricing model shift, it's a huge operational shift that Dave described. And that's why progress is slower than people would like to see. I mean, NSCA does have resources that, for companies that are very focused on trying to accelerate their transition from product and project-based revenue models to more of a service-oriented recurring revenue model. We do have resources to help with that, and would always love to get a chance to talk to integration companies about what their unique challenges are and see if there's a way we can help.
I think that's a great point. And to be sure, we do not want to minimize the operational transition that is required to embrace this. We certainly all recognize it is not as easy as snapping your fingers. It does require a lot of hard work. It's nice to see in this chart some incremental improvement in terms of forecasted full year revenue being derived from service offerings, moving away from that less than 5% and even shifting up to 5 to 10%, 11 to 20%, seeing those percentage points shift right there from 2025 to 2026, I think is encouraging, especially given how hard the lift can be to reorient a business. So let's move into the next question, and I'm actually going to combine the next two questions I had planned, focusing on IT. Obviously, the lines are blurring between technology trades. More of the technology estate is falling within IT department's remit. So I'm kind of curious how integrators are continuing to try to upskill in areas like networking and IT. Should integrators be thinking about ISO, SOC 2 certification? And then part two is, what are your ideas on how to diffuse IT departments, sometimes native skepticism about AV, the whole idea of like not on my network when it comes to AV devices? How do we upskill ourselves, and how do we get around or diffuse that skepticism that leads IT departments to sometimes say, not on my network, keep your AV stuff out of here?
Yeah, Dave, you want to take a crack at it first?
Well, thanks, Tom. That's a big set of questions there, Dan, to tackle. I'll do my best. Look, speaking from our perspective, this isn't a new issue. With IoT-centric devices and more demand for a command of networking-centric capability and the ability to articulate well at the table with the IT stakeholder. It's not new, it's just gaining more momentum. And so I think more than ever, having both the competency in-house for an integrator, as well as having somebody who is customer facing, or a group of people that are customer facing that can truly have a conversation with the CIO or CTO of our target customer and have that conversation in a way that is compelling, and they know the vocabulary and they have that good, strong dialogue going with that stakeholder is just imperative in today's world. And so I think upskilling, making sure that we have the right talent or access to the right talent. Look, for smaller integrators, you may not be able to afford that type of talent. And so sometimes outsourcing or partnering can be a way to get that competency. But for all of us, I think more and more having that IT competency is critical. So looking for engineers with IT backgrounds, certifying against standards that align with customer IT priorities. So you mentioned in that question, Dan, about certification. So just purely from an IMS perspective, that is part of our roadmap. And it's something we are acting on presently. We've been, for the past 6 months, working on the ISO 27001 certification process, which is really all around your processes and being able to have that level of competency that we put in front of an IT stakeholder that provides some level of credibility in that conversation, that we take this seriously. And so, I think that's, just part of the commitment we have, to providing a higher level of confidence with that IT stakeholder. I think as far as diffusing IT departments, boy, there's a whole lot to that. We could talk for hours on that topic, I'm sure, but maybe at high level, first, I would say, when you hear that not on the network, our reflex reaction is usually to couch it as a security thing, which may be the issue, but not necessarily. I think it merits some questioning down. So tell me more about that is probably our good reflex response, because it may be that they don't want it on their network because as soon as it's on there, they're taking responsibility for the functional operation as well as the resilience of that that endpoint device or devices, and that's something they're not prepared to do, or it could be security centric. So understanding why that pushback, I think, is important. I think the next thing is just look, this is a problem they already have. So whether or not they quote approve it or not, these things are already on their network, are going to be on their network, collaboration platforms, cameras, signage, they're going to exist whether or not it's approved. And they typically don't say not on my network because it's AV. It's rather that unmanaged endpoints present risk. And so our job is to basically acknowledge that yes, there's risk in any unmanaged endpoint, and talk about how we will handle and manage that for them or in concert with them. I think having a network readiness and security document is super important in the conversation. And just, hey, look, AV is guilty until proven safe on your network. We get it. So adopt that posture. That is the right posture, and then work with them as a professional to help meet those objectives that they have, as well as resolve the concerns around managing those devices for them and with them, and also from a security posture.
Anything that you would add there about the whole idea of network readiness and maybe integrators being better positioned to de-risk or minimize risks on some of those endpoints?
Yeah, just a couple points, Dan. I mean, I agree with what Dave said, and but I mean, there's a huge opportunity for integrators that have strong IT and networking skills. And I guess the thing would be, companies got to look in the mirror and they got to be honest with themselves. I mean, the industry, everything's moving rapidly, toward an IP endpoint environment. And, the question to ask in the mirror is, are our people ready for what customers need, like now, and what they're going to need tomorrow? And, in order to be, relevant, to use that word again, going forward, it's probably really important to face that question, because demand is going there. It's moving forward, whether we're ready or not. I think the certifications that you both mentioned, I think, that's going to be significant from a credibility standpoint going forward, especially for integrators that want that deeper IT alignment. From a cybersecurity standpoint, that's how I would probably address the skepticism, or the diffusing the skepticism part of your question. Like I think I said before, NSCA sees integrators entering kind of a new era when it comes to cybersecurity. Like Dave was describing, so much of what AV and security integrators install lives on the network, and customers are paranoid, rightfully so, about cybersecurity. It's breaches that keep them up at night, or the possibility of breaches that keeps them up at night. And I think a lot of integrators probably underestimate how central that issue is. And I know we're probably low on time, but I think integrators really need to think a lot about whether or not they're prepared to have those cybersecurity conversations with their customers, and also just recognize that cyber credentials, if they're not already being required on bids that you're seeing, they're going to be a lot more so going forward. So think about cybersecurity credibility, think about cyber insurance expectations, think about formal training requirements. Elevating cybersecurity credibility is not really optional anymore. It's what future customers are going to expect.
I like that framing, cybersecurity credibility. It's making sure you have credibility on that topic for your clients. I think that's a great way to think about it. We are a little bit low on time, as you said, Tom, but I did not want to end a State of the Industry webinar without talking about talent-related challenges. I know that's something a lot of integrators wring their hands about. And I will just say, before we get to this question, last call for Q&A, anything you want to drop in the widget. We already have a lot of questions queued up, but if you want yours to be maybe the last one we get to, please drop it in ASAP, because we already have a lot of them queued up there. Don't leave yours out. Drop it in now if you can. But let's get back to that talent-related question. We have the data up right now. How difficult do integration businesses you talk to, Tom, how difficult does your business, Dave, find it to identify, to recruit, to onboard, to retain talent? Are there particular tactics you recommend or are utilizing to level up the talent within your organization to buck against these trends?
I can jump in, Dave. I'll talk about the industry in general. So definitely, talent is the most consistent concern we hear from NSCA members. Awareness of the industry is at the heart of the problem. I've used the term, whenever I get a chance to talk about talent, I always talk about how the industry exists in a bubble. And inside the bubble, we all know how exciting and impactful the work is that we do, how great the careers can be in this industry. But outside of the bubble, people don't have any idea that the industry exists. And that's a real issue. People don't know the industry exists. They'll never choose to pursue working in it. So, in NSCA's financial analysis of the industry, talent and workforce pressure was the most common concern entering the coming year. The recommendation that we keep coming back to is simple, but it's not easy. Acknowledge the awareness problem. And take responsibility for fixing it. That means showing up where candidates already are, high schools, technical schools, colleges, job fairs, and be the boots on the ground that educate people that don't know about this industry. NSCA can help to tell that story. We can provide presentation and marketing materials. Just reach out and help us. And the talent profile itself is changing a lot, right? Like the types of people that are going to make an impact on integration companies is changing. Might have less of a need to hire people that carry toolkits around based on what we were just talking about with the network stuff. We might be looking for more people that are fluent in IP, data, and AI and cybersecurity. So that's another factor in the talent challenge. But that evolution is directly tied to how integrators remain relevant, because in order to remain relevant, we're going to have to bring in those future team members that are going to help to make an impact from a network perspective and just with all this evolving technology.
Dave, as Integrator of the Year, again, IMS probably knows something about finding great talent and retaining great talent. You can either speak to your own business or speak more generally, but that idea of retaining and finding this great talent, what would your suggestions be? What are your ideas?
Yeah, I will speak more from IMS's perspective. So we are fortunate to have just truly fantastic people here at IMS every day. I just count my blessings for the folks that choose to call IMS home and how much they care about our company and our customers. And it really is a special environment here. So. But I'll say this: look, the talent demand equation is real. The demand continues to outpace supply. Just here, where we're headquartered, just outside of Philadelphia, we've identified 27 AV integrators that we would call competitors of IMS, and all of those folks have staffing needs. They need technicians, they need engineers, they need commissioners and programmers, and so we all have that same need for talent. It's really tough. There's just not enough supply to hire your way out of it. And so, Tom, you hit on it, and that is where we, find success is hiring from not just schools, but junior folks, people with the right character, the right DNA, and then schooling them up, having apprenticeship type programs, if you will, loosely named apprenticeship, but moving somebody up who wants to be a project manager, starting them as a junior project manager, and then working them up as they demonstrate competency. So growing your own, training your own, relying on all the great resources. I mean, there's so much out there that you can use to get people up to speed. It's one of the big advantages of NSCA, commercial integrators, surfacing all of these great materials and sources of training is fantastic, and it's a catalyst to get people up to speed. And then, of course, taking advantage of all that our great vendors and partners are able to do, as well as what we do internally to to get people to the right level of competence. And then, getting that, building that is one thing, and then making sure that we are doing, I say this to all of us collectively, everything that we can to make our companies great places to be. So people that are truly A players, people that are truly at the top of their game want to stay with your company and be a part of what you're doing. You never take that for granted. It's not a matter of a couple dollars an hour. Oftentimes, sometimes it's money, but oftentimes it's, having the right culture that meets people's needs, something they feel a part of, something where they feel valued, something where they feel they can develop their career and reach their ultimate aspirations. Making sure that our cultures are as good as they can be in terms of being a great place for top-notch professionals to work.
Yeah, that's an absolute great note to end on, because I think culture is absolutely indispensable. Before we get to Q&A, I did just want to kind of have a quick final Jeopardy round with both of you. Just a few words if you can, because I do want to get to as many questions as I can. But the reason you might be most concerned if you're an integrator right now, and then conversely, the reason you might be most optimistic if you're an integrator right now. If you can answer both sides of that in just a few words, then we'll go right to the Q&A. But reasons for caution and reasons for optimism. Whoever wants to start first.
I'll let you take a breath, Dave.
I think for caution, if we're tackling both of these at once, I would say the talent gap is the number one thing. I think many would agree with that. Customer expectations are the evolving expectations also super high on the list, but definitely from my perspective, that talent gap. And then in terms of optimism, look, I think the need for quality providers that can effectively enable our customers' mission-critical communication and collaboration strategies and actualize those, bring it to life, serve them well. What we do is mission-critical. And so there's a strong demand out there. It's a great industry. We have a chance to really make people happy and delight customers. And I find that delighted customers tend to stay with you and they tend to buy more stuff from you. So I think there's a lot of reasons for optimism.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Dave. And in terms of like cause for concern, I think if I was forced to boil it down, it's not being ready for what customers need today and especially for tomorrow. And we talked about this quite a bit, like how the industry is evolving. The integrators that have the right expertise in-house are in an incredibly strong position because they've become indispensable advisors. We talked about that. They're helping their customers plan, not just provide solutions for something that exists right now, but they're helping to plan how their companies can continue to evolve, how they go to market or how they create processes in-house. And, integrators are in such a strong position, but conversely, the integrators that are in such a strong position, they create an environment in which the ones who aren't are very at risk of becoming irrelevant and falling behind. So that would be the biggest concern. But in terms of like reason for optimism, there's so many. I mean, what gives NSCA optimism is getting a chance to talk to so many integrators, like IMS, companies that we get a chance to talk to every day, NSCA member companies, member integration companies. They're the best integrators in North America, and they understand where the industry's going. They're investing in training and talent. They understand codes and compliance. They choose projects wisely. They choose the ones that are going to allow them to be successful financially. They put their companies in a position to succeed and to hire those critical employees that are going to be so important for evolving their companies. They make disciplined decisions. Yeah, there's definitely challenges ahead, evolving technology, economic uncertainty, rising expectations. But we work with integration companies with foundational strength that puts them in a position to be successful. And remember when we started this whole conversation at the beginning, we talked about, customers see integrators work as need to have, not nice to have. Mission critical is how Dave just described it. Systems have to work. That means customers will continue to invest in trusted integration partners. Integrators that are prepared will be indispensable. That's a reason for optimism. That leads to long-term, sticky, profitable relationships. And it's a great time to be an integrator right now. There's tons of reasons for optimism.
I think there are tons of reasons for optimism. I think it is a great time to be an integrator right now. And I think your indispensability argument is perhaps the strongest argument we have for why this is a really good time to be an integrator. I want to thank you so much, Dave. Thank you so much, Tom. We do have a lot of questions here. I want to make sure we try to end close to on time, but let's see if we can get through at least a few of them. What is your best advice for the next generation of AV leaders, the tenured industry folks that will soon be becoming industry leaders in the coming years? Your advice to them, the next generation.
I would say talk to people like Dave. So if you're a next generation leader or you're on a track to become a leader in an integration company, yes, all of the things we talked about today are extremely relevant. How important it is to be nimble from a technology evolution standpoint, how important it is to have the right people in place. All of these things are extremely relevant. Just as relevant, and perhaps more so, is the importance of taking the time to ask industry veterans, the many, folks who run really strong integration companies in our industry, what do you wish you knew better before you got into a position of leadership? These are people that are running very unique companies. Our industry is unique. It's unique to run an integration company. Ask veteran leaders what they wish they knew, and then double down on learning how to put yourself in a position to succeed because you're giving yourself an advantage that those veterans didn't have. So that would be my advice, is to tap into that leadership, that veteran leadership.
I would agree with that, Tom. And despite the fact I think you just called me old, but
veteran.
No, look, I'm a firm believer in building a network of mentors and peers, and there's not one person that has all the best advice or answers, and carefully surrounding yourself with a group of folks that you share similar values with and maybe are a little further down the road. It's hard to argue with that being a sound methodology for advice for somebody who's aspiring to build a career with a bigger span of control in this industry.
As the security industry continues to evolve, do you believe integrators will need to add a CTO level leader to better capture customer mindshare and guide emerging technologies?
I think that competency needs to exist if it doesn't already. And so, as I had mentioned earlier, I think there's the technical side of it. So you need that resourced, and I'll just stay away from titles and quantities of people and all that stuff. But you need that resourced people that can deal with the day-to-day IT-centric demands, both externally and internally for that matter. And then there's the whole customer-facing side of it. So deals can be blown in just a single misstep with that IT stakeholder. If you're not speaking the right language, you will uninspire that potential customer in a way that may be difficult to recover from. So today, in today's IT-centric IoT world, having somebody that or a group of people that can carry that conversation with the IT leader at point of sale is just critically important in my view.
I'm going to try to sneak one more question in here. What is your biggest challenge with technology manufacturers right now? For example, lead times, terms and conditions your organization may not agree with, pricing, tariffs, etc. Your biggest challenge when it comes to your supplier partners?
It's going to be more for you, Dave.
Yeah, no, look, it's a good question. I think all of those things, and I'll take maybe the chicken way out because I think it's the only answer that is right, is all of those things can be issues with any provider. I will say that I think in this industry and with these manufacturers and these partners, and I do see them as partners of IMS, and I'm sure you guys do as well. I think we have a great group, and they're really committed to working through challenges with us, whether they're macroeconomic, tariff-centric, technology-centric, regulation-centric, whatever they are. And I think that's important to have partners that you trust and partners that will go that extra mile with you when there are challenges.
So thank you so much again, Dave and Tom. There are lots of questions we did not get to. I can assure those questioners we do have all those questions logged, and I'm happy to circulate them to Dave and Tom for perhaps one-on-one answers by email after the fact, so those questions will not go unanswered. But again, thank you so much, David Fisher, President, Systems Integration Division of IMS Technology Services, and Tom LeBlanc, Executive Director of NSCA, for your invaluable insights here today for our annual State of the Industry webinar. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for allowing us to participate.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dan.
And again, I want to thank our sponsors who help bring this content to you. ADI, of course, Salient Systems, and NSCA, who is our partner in all things state of the industry. You can find our full article about the state of the industry featuring lots more data in our upcoming January-February issue of CI plus SSI. The digital edition will launch on February 2nd. You can also go to commercialintegrator.com and securitysales.com to access a downloadable version of that State of the Industry report. You'll be able to find this session on demand within about 24 hours of right now. If you go to either commercialintegrator.com or securitysales.com, feel free to forward that to your peers and colleagues who you think would benefit from this conversation, benefit from the information we've shared with you today. And if you do have a moment and you haven't done so already, please do take that survey. We look at every bit of survey feedback we get to make sure that these presentations are as informative and worth your time as possible. Again, Dave, thank you so much. Tom, thank you so much. And finally, thank you so much to our audience for joining us today. We hope this has been a good, valuable investment of your time. See you soon.